Elizabeth Montgomery's crystal goblets clinked as she raised her glass in a toast to the family's success, her neatly manicured hands steady despite the fact that she was already on her third glass of Bordeaux. My husband, James, walked uncomfortably to my side but remained silent, never having had the courage to stand up to his mother. She thought she had finally succeeded in proving that I was not worthy of her baby boy or the Montgomery family name, which happens from time to time. Of course, my dear, not everyone can achieve the longevity that Montgomery Cosmetics has, and 30 years of success is hard won. I thought about the papers that were sitting in my home office, already signed and ready for tomorrow morning's board meeting. I've been planning the biggest business coup her company has ever seen, Mom. James tries to talk to me every week. Maybe we should talk about something else. Why did Elizabeth interrupt him? Victoria Pierce, the daughter of Elizabeth's best friend, had recently returned to town after her divorce, and Elizabeth had been unkindly pushing her on James for months in the marble bathroom of the Montgomery mansion. I gazed at my reflection and thought back to how it all began 3 years ago. I had been a rising star in the world of retail, with a rapidly expanding chain of boutique stores called Fashion Paradise that was making a splash in the major fashion magazines and attracting the attention of many fashion brands. Then I made what Elizabeth considered to be a fatal mistake. I married her son, James, whom I met at a charity gala. He was sweet and kind and completely dominated by his mother, but I loved him, and I foolishly thought that love would be enough to overcome Elizabeth's disapproval of my nouveau riche status in a Chinese-American background. And the sabotage began at a very young age, when Elizabeth would inadvertently mention my boutique to her social friends about the quality problems at my boutique, the sudden cancellation of contracts by major suppliers, and the landlord's unexpected rent increases or refusal to renew leases. What Elizabeth doesn't know is that I've documented everything, every chance phone call in which she's encouraged a vendor to drop me, every meeting in which she's pressured the landlord, every subtle threat she's made to anyone doing business with Style Haven, but, more importantly, she's never bothered to take a closer look at the investment. When I got back to the restaurant, Elizabeth was back to her business success story. She was talking about connections. Really, she was talking about the right people, the right backgrounds. You know them. Christina knows them perfectly. I replied that the connections I made in building the case against her, the vendors had provided documentation of her intervention, the owners had documented her threats. He hadn't known what was going to happen either, and I'd kept him in the dark to protect him and to make sure his reaction tomorrow would be normal. No thank you, I said. I have an early meeting tomorrow. She couldn't help but open up. Oh, still trying to save your little store. Sometimes it's better to concede gracefully. I thought of the times I'd cried privately over her destruction, of the nights spent rebuilding after each attack, of the careful planning and patience it took to make her own tactics backfire. I'm always on the lookout for new opportunities. Elizabeth's smile became condescending. How nice. Perhaps more suited to your retail skills. James started to object, but sometimes the first choice isn't the best choice. Honey, I packed my things and pretended I didn't hear. Elizabeth Montgomery spent 3 years trying to push me out of her family and ruin my career. She called me while we were gone. Don't act like a stranger. Just because your business didn't work out doesn't mean you're no longer family to me. In a way, I looked back and couldn't resist a small hint. Thank you, Elizabeth. You've taught me a lot about business, about getting what people don't want to let go of, about patience. Tomorrow should be interesting. James follows me. He apologizes again for his mother's behavior. I don't know why she's acting like this. I should have said something. It's okay, I assure him. Everything will change soon. What do you mean? I patted his hand and got ready for tomorrow's news. Remember I love you. That night, I went over everything one last time. The evidence of Elizabeth's sabotage was carefully organized and ready to be released. The equity documents showing my controlling interest in Montgomery Cosmetics. The board's vote had been finalized. My cell phone lit up with one last message from Marcus. Tomorrow everything was in place. Elizabeth wouldn't know what a shock she'd been dealt. What a blow. I smiled as I thought of Elizabeth gleefully toasting to her family's success. Tomorrow would redefine what that really meant. Montgomery Cosmetics boardroom at 8:45 a.m. I was sitting at the table where Elizabeth always sat, but she didn't know it yet. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows I could see her coming out into the parking lot and heading towards the building with her usual air of superiority. Are you sure? She flinched slightly when she saw me. Christine, what are you doing here? Her eyes narrowed as she noticed me sitting in her seat. That's my seat. Not anymore, I said calmly. Please sit in the other seats as the other board members fishtailed in. We have a lot to discuss. This is ridiculous, she droned on, still standing. I'm the CEO of this company. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, and in fact, Marcus smoothly interrupted her words. This emergency board meeting was to address the leadership transition. The blood faded from Elizabeth's face. That's impossible. If someone was buying up shares, I would know. Would you? I opened the folder in front of me and asked as if you knew who was really behind Pacific Ridge Investment Group or Peak Parade Holding. You've been so busy destroying my business that you've never noticed who's buying up. You're the other members of the board of directors of my business watched me almost unabashedly. And many of them had their own opinions about Elizabeth's tyrannical leadership and discriminatory practices. The board has agreed that a change in leadership is necessary for the continued growth and ethical operation of the company, Marcus added. She whispers that this company is my life as much as my business is mine, and before you systematically destroy it, I ask you quietly, I have all the evidence of Elizabeth's actions, every threat, every rigged contract, every deal sabotaged, and I have projected the evidence on the boardroom screen, emails, taped conversations, sworn testimonials from vendors and owners, 3 years of her attacks on me, a meticulous record of activity. You could have accepted me. You could have accepted me. I sat in a chair and watched her carefully constructed world crumble. You could have given me a chance to prove myself, but instead you decided I wasn't good enough for your son or your social circle, so you tried to destroy me. The board members, in reviewing the evidence, grew increasingly concerned that Elizabeth's behavior was not only personal, but unethical, and perhaps even illegal. I want what I deserve. I demand control of this company, to modernize it, to make it grow, to make it better than it was under you. And I want you to understand what it's like to have everything taken away from you by someone you underestimated. And Marcus started handing out the severance packages that we'd prepared. And when you read the documents, her hands trembled. And you thought of everything, didn't you? I've learned from the best. I've said it before. You've taught me that patience and careful planning are everything in the business world. Sometimes you have to let your opponents think they've won before you take the final action. And for the next hour the signatures and legal jargon became a blur. And Elizabeth signed everything that was laid out in front of her. And her perfect makeup failed to hide the fact that she was in 10:30. She was no longer the CEO of Montgomery Cosmetics. As she stood up and prepared to leave, she turned to James one last time. She had planned this all along, she said bitterly. She married you to get me. James shook his head. No, Mom, I married her because I loved her. You turned it into a war. You lost. Elizabeth left, and the board of directors swiftly approved the transition plan we had created. Transition plan. And at noon I officially became the CEO of Montgomery Cosmetics, responsible for modernizing and expanding the company. I need to protect you, he whispered, and I explained that I needed your reaction to be truthful, that your mother had to believe that you knew nothing, and he nodded slowly. And now what will happen? Now we rebuild the company and the family, but under different conditions. Over the next few months, Montgomery Cosmetics underwent a transformation as we launched new product lines, modernized our marketing, and expanded into international markets. A year after my daughter-in-law, I was sitting in Elizabeth's office reviewing quarterly reports. The company was thriving and we were gaining market share. The phone rang. It was Elizabeth's number. I understand now, she said without thinking. What have I done to you and how do you feel? All the pain she's caused me over the years. I've cried over her devastation, and it took careful planning on my part to turn it all around. Yes, I'm making it very simple. You're another pause. James mentioned that you're pregnant with a girl due in March and that I'd like to be a part of her life if you'd allow it. I looked at the family photos on the table. James and I both smiled genuinely for the first time in many years. At last year's company party, she quietly, you did prove to be stronger than I thought you were. After hanging up the phone, I went to the window and looked out at the city. Elizabeth had been trying for years to prove that I was not worthy of her family and company. She had learned the other side of power, what it meant to have to ask rather than demand, to accept rather than control, and sometimes at family gatherings I noticed that she looked at me not with the contempt she had before, but with a kind of respect.